Hello and welcome back to Lesson 2 of our Year 1 scheme of work in coding with Scratch Junior. So let's get straight into it with Lesson 2, which is to create an algorithm that controls movement of a sprite. So quite a bit of new vocabulary, and like last week, we'll really push that as we go through the lesson. So the success criteria involves remembering what an algorithm is. We can explain motion and movement. I will quickly change that to movement actually, because that is the word we keep discussing. And experiment with different movement blocks. Motion we tend to talk about in year 2, so movement for those, a bit of in-video editing there. As usual, we go to the vocabulary to start, see what the children know, and start to build on that. Algorithm we looked at last week as a set of instructions. Movement, sprite. The sprite, they are least likely to understand. Sprite just means a character. So you think of popular characters like Sonic the Hedgehog, Mario, they are sprites. We like to try and get the children inspired by what they are learning with computing. We try to apply it to the real world. So sometimes we use big questions, and here's an example of one here. Who is more clever, a robot or a human? Let the children discuss, give you reasons why, and then ultimately you can tell them that it is us humans because we control the robots through inputs. We've not managed to have a robot that's turned against us just yet, so we can talk about the idea that humans control those robots through algorithms as well, so it reinforces what we've done before. So, going on to movement, as we've just alluded to, we like to talk in terms of real life and the children's experiences. So we got the slide here. How do we move the sprite in our game? Hopefully they can identify that the sprite is Mario or Luigi, and we can take a look at this controller over here and discuss how can we move the sprite. What can we do? What would the sprite do if we press this button? So a bit of a discussion. What do the children think would happen? Hopefully they can talk about moving left. They might talk about movement at first. Can they be more specific about where would we move? And then what would the sprite do if we press this button? They may say go down. They may say the sprite might crouch. Something along those lines. So, as a bit of a prediction to challenge your children, they've experimented with the code and creating algorithms last week. Can they make a prediction about what the sprite will do with this code? They may have remembered that the blue blocks show movement, so they may be able to tell you. And then, after this, we model to the children algorithms to show movement. Our key questions will be, how do you know which blocks are movement blocks? What does the sprite do when our code works? So we go over to Scratch Junior, and I'm going to come off of that. I'm going to go for a plain background for now, and we'll talk about why later. So here's our sprite. We're going to explain to the children we're only using the green flag still. That's something we learnt about last week, and we need to explain that the movement blocks are always blue. Always a light blue. It's important the children know that, because as they move through school, they'll be working with different programming, different coding, different coding programs, and they always tend to be blue. So if the children can associate that with blue, that'll really help. So we can model putting together some movement, and we can predict what might happen. We could ask questions like, how do I start the code? I put the code together, and tick is not moving. Why is he not moving? Hopefully the children can say, well, we need to press that green button. So press the green button, okay? And we can talk about, well, what happened with this one? That was a strange movement. And if the children can't tell you, we can always just move that on its own and watch that one on its own. And it was a jump, okay? And then we can get the children to play with the numbers. If I used a really big number, like 20, what do you think would happen? And there he goes, 20 times. 20 of those rotations, those small rotations. So, the first task is for the children to experiment with movement. What can they get Tick to do? And again, they learn a lot through the experimentation, as we noted last week. So it's a case of getting them to experiment purely with those movement blocks here. Okay, so I'm going to move Tick back around a little. Okay, there we are. We've got just reset his position by clicking on this part here. Now, to set up the next task, we're going to get rid of all of those. We need to go to the backgrounds, and we want to choose this school classroom scene here. Okay, and we're going to drag Tick to this chair here. And the second task involves using movement blocks to guide the sprite to the whiteboard. So, here's Tick. He's been asked to come to the front of class, to the whiteboard, but we're not allowed to drag him. We've got to use green flag and movement blocks. So what could we do? Well, I think we need to move left because he needs to go here, then he needs to go forward. So we could try that. Oh, but that's not worked. Why would that not work? Then you can ask the children to get on with the task. Whilst the children get on with the task, if they've completed it, they will call you over, show you their code, explain it to you, and you can use the assessment tick sheet to see if they've been able to achieve that objective.